Before you decide what happened here, ask yourself one question. How much damage can a single assumption cause? The words would echo through countless conversations in the days that followed. But on that bright Saturday afternoon, they existed only in the silence hanging over a crowded intersection on the edge of a quiet American suburb. Traffic had slowed to a crawl as drivers noticed several patrol vehicles positioned carefully along the shoulder. Storefront windows reflected flashing emergency lights across polished glass, while shoppers stood several yards away, speaking only in whispers. At the center of every curious glance stood Maya Jefferson, a black woman in her early 50s dressed in a charcoal jacket, dark slacks, and comfortable walking shoes. Her hands remained clearly visible exactly where she had been instructed to keep them. Her breathing was slow and deliberate, and although concern rested gently across her face, fear never seemed to overpower her composure. Only a few feet away, Officer Ryan Carter watched every movement with intense concentration. Years of responding to unpredictable situations had taught him to remain alert, and recent events in his career had only reinforced that instinct. Yet beneath the discipline of his uniform lingered a quiet uncertainty he could not entirely explain. Something about the woman standing before him refused to match the assumptions that had first shaped the encounter. Officer Emily Brooks stood slightly behind him, carefully observing both Maya and the gathering crowd. She noticed parents guiding children a little farther back, a delivery driver quietly setting his packages down beside his truck, and a young college student lowering his phone after realizing the moment felt far more serious than something to post online. Nobody shouted. Nobody moved closer. The entire intersection seemed suspended between ordinary life and an unanswered question. Maya slowly looked toward the dashboard clock inside her sedan through the open driver's door. She had been scheduled to arrive across town less than 20 minutes earlier. Inside a conference hall, dozens of community leaders, police trainers, neighborhood volunteers, and young officers were already taking their seats for a workshop devoted to safer communication during high-pressure encounters. She had spent months preparing the presentation, rewriting every page until every sentence reflected one simple belief. Respect should begin before certainty. That message now seemed painfully distant from the reality surrounding her. Ryan studied the vehicle once again. The registration matched. The insurance information was current. Dispatch had confirmed her identification without hesitation. Even so, an earlier misunderstanding had transformed an ordinary traffic stop into something neither side had expected. Maya had followed every instruction carefully, announcing each movement before making it, speaking calmly instead of defensively, yet uncertainty had continued growing with every passing minute. Nearby, an elderly veteran quietly removed his baseball cap and held it against his chest while watching Maya's posture with growing curiosity. He had spent decades serving beside military leaders, and something about the way she carried herself felt deeply familiar. It was not confidence born from pride. It was the quiet discipline of someone accustomed to placing responsibility before comfort. Ryan noticed the veteran watching but returned his attention to Maya as another message arrived through his radio. Dispatch informed him that additional verification was still in progress and requested that everyone remain exactly where they were until supervisors completed their review. Emily exchanged a brief glance with Ryan but said nothing. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass across the intersection while sunlight stretched long reflections across the pavement. Maya gently closed her eyes for one brief moment before opening them again, her expression unchanged. She was not thinking about herself. She was thinking about the audience waiting across town and wondering how many people had begun asking why their guest speaker had not yet arrived. None of the people gathered along that roadside understood why she remained so calm. None of them knew that within the next few minutes, a single piece of information would force every person standing there to reconsider everything they believed they had witnessed from the very beginning. The quiet tension lingering over the roadside slowly faded as the story slipped backward several hours to a peaceful morning filled with purpose rather than uncertainty. Long before flashing patrol lights reflected across the pavement, Maya Jefferson had stood alone inside the conference room of a regional community center reviewing a stack of handwritten notes one final time. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting warm patterns across polished hardwood floors while volunteers arranged chairs in careful rows for the afternoon workshop. A large screen displayed the title of the event, Building Trust Through Better Communication. Coffee brewed in the lobby, neighborhood leaders greeted one another with friendly smiles, and several young police recruits quietly took seats near the front, eager to hear the keynote speaker whose work had earned respect across the state. Maya preferred arriving early. She believed that conversations before an event often mattered more than the speech itself. One by one, she welcomed volunteers, shook hands with custodians preparing the room, and thanked each person by name. She never hurried past anyone simply because they held a different position. Years of public service had taught her that genuine leadership revealed itself in ordinary moments rather than formal ceremonies. On a nearby table rested a leather folder containing her presentation, along with dozens of handwritten cards she planned to distribute after the workshop. Each card carried a personal message reminding participants that every encounter between strangers begins with uncertainty, but it does not have to end with misunderstanding. A teenage volunteer asked why she still wrote every note by hand instead of printing them. Maya smiled warmly before answering. People remember sincerity long after they forget perfect words. The young volunteer nodded thoughtfully and carefully continued arranging the name tags. Several organizers approached Maya to review the afternoon schedule. They expected nearly 200 attendees, including neighborhood advocates, business owners, academy instructors, veterans, clergy members, and patrol supervisors from surrounding jurisdictions. Maya listened carefully to every detail before making one small request. She asked that the question and answer session be extended because she believed honest conversations deserved more time than prepared speeches. Nobody objected. In fact, several organizers quietly admitted that was exactly why they had invited her. She possessed an unusual ability to lower tension simply by helping people feel heard. Before leaving for the venue where she planned to meet another community partner, Maya walked through the empty auditorium one last time. She paused near the front row, imagining the difficult conversations that might unfold there later that afternoon. Some people would arrive carrying painful experiences. Others would bring deeply held opinions shaped by years of difficult work. Maya never expected everyone to agree. Her goal was far simpler. She hoped each person would leave willing to pause before assuming they already understood someone else's story. As she stepped outside, the crisp morning air carried the scent of freshly watered flower beds surrounding the community center. She placed the presentation folder carefully inside her sedan beside a small box filled with resource guides for participants. Before starting the engine, she checked the route one final time. The drive would take less than 30 minutes, leaving plenty of time for one brief stop at a neighborhood outreach office to collect additional materials requested by the organizers. She smiled quietly to herself, believing the day would unfold exactly as planned. She had no way of knowing that a routine drive across town would delay the workshop, leave hundreds of people wondering where their speaker had gone, and transform the very lesson she intended to teach into a living example that no audience could ever forget. Across town, Officer Ryan Carter began his shift the same way he had begun hundreds before it, arriving at the precinct well before sunrise while the parking lot still glistened from the previous night's light rain. He greeted the dispatcher by name, accepted a cup of black coffee from the break room without adding sugar, and quietly reviewed the calls assigned to his patrol district. To anyone watching, he looked like the picture of consistency. His uniform was neatly pressed, his patrol vehicle carefully inspected, and every piece of equipment accounted for before he left the station. Yet beneath that disciplined routine rested a burden few people noticed. During the previous year, Ryan had responded to several unpredictable incidents that left lasting impressions on him. Although every situation had ended without serious harm, each one reinforced the belief that hesitation could carry consequences. Over time, caution slowly transformed into constant vigilance, and constant vigilance quietly became suspicion whenever something seemed even slightly unusual. Captain Laura Bennett noticed the change long before Ryan recognized it himself. During the morning briefing, she reminded every officer that awareness and assumption were not the same thing. Observe first, she said calmly. Verify second. Decide last. When those steps happen out of order, good people can make poor decisions. Ryan nodded respectfully, believing he fully understood the lesson. He genuinely wanted to serve his community well. He enjoyed helping stranded motorists, checking on elderly residents during severe weather, and volunteering at youth programs whenever his schedule allowed. Many local families knew him by name because he often stopped simply to ask how people were doing. That reputation mattered deeply to him. Even so, the pressure of never wanting to overlook a potential danger had gradually reshaped how he interpreted uncertainty. Later that morning, Ryan and Officer Emily Brooks drove through quiet neighborhoods discussing the community workshop scheduled for the afternoon. Emily mentioned that she had heard outstanding reviews about the guest speaker leading the session on communication and de-escalation. Ryan smiled politely and admitted he hoped they would finish their patrol in time to attend at least the final hour. "We could always learn something new," Emily said with an encouraging grin. Ryan agreed. Experience never means you know everything. Neither of them realized how quickly those words would be tested. Shortly before noon, dispatch reported a routine traffic concern involving a vehicle matching a description provided by another caller who believed something unusual had occurred near a shopping district. The information was incomplete, and dispatch emphasized that officers should simply verify the situation. Ryan acknowledged the call and steered the patrol vehicle toward the location. Along the drive, he reviewed the limited details several times, trying to prepare for every reasonable possibility while reminding himself not to jump to conclusions. Emily quietly noticed that he reread the information even after memorizing it. She had worked beside Ryan long enough to recognize the habit. Whenever details felt uncertain, he preferred filling the gaps with preparation rather than patience. The afternoon sun climbed steadily higher as they approached the intersection where Maya Jefferson had stopped at a red light, completely unaware that she had just entered the same stretch of road. Inside her sedan, the leather folder containing her presentation rested neatly on the passenger seat beside dozens of handwritten cards intended for the workshop attendees. Ryan saw only another vehicle matching the description from dispatch. Maya saw only another patrol car approaching from behind. Neither person expected the next few minutes to become the defining lesson both of them would carry for the rest of their lives. Officer Ryan Carter activated his emergency lights, and Maya Jefferson immediately guided her sedan smoothly onto the wide shoulder beside a row of maple trees bordering the shopping district. The entire stop lasted only a few seconds, yet something almost invisible shifted the moment both vehicles came to rest. Maya placed the transmission in park, rolled down her driver's window, turned off the engine, and rested both hands where they could be seen clearly. She had taught these exact steps during countless community workshops because she believed predictable communication reduced unnecessary tension. As Ryan approached, Maya greeted him politely. Before he spoke, "Good afternoon, officer. Please let me know exactly how you would like me to proceed." Her calm tone surprised him. Most drivers immediately asked why they had been stopped. Maya asked only for instructions. Ryan explained that dispatch had requested a routine verification connected to information received earlier that afternoon. Maya nodded without interruption. "Of course. My driver's license is inside my purse on the passenger seat, and my registration is in the glove compartment. I will wait for your instructions before reaching for either one." Emily Brooks watched quietly from the opposite side of the vehicle, appreciating how clearly Maya described every movement before making it. The conversation remained respectful, almost ordinary, until a brief misunderstanding quietly entered the moment. Ryan glanced toward the leather portfolio resting on the passenger seat. The embossed government seal visible on its cover caught his attention. "What is inside the folder?" he asked. Maya looked toward it without moving her hands. "Presentation materials for a community workshop," she answered. "I would be happy to show you once you tell me it is appropriate to reach for it." Ryan studied the folder again. The seal looked official, yet he could not immediately identify it from where he stood. Dispatch had provided only limited information, and uncertainty continued filling the spaces where complete facts should have been. Emily noticed Ryan's expression becoming more focused. She quietly reminded him that every document requested so far could still be verified through normal procedure. Ryan acknowledged her comment with a slight nod, but his attention remained fixed on the unanswered questions surrounding the stop. A few nearby shoppers slowed as they walked between stores, noticing the patrol vehicle parked behind the sedan. None approached the scene. An elderly veteran carrying grocery bags paused beneath a shade tree, observing from a respectful distance. Maya continued waiting without speaking until Ryan addressed her again. For now, please remain exactly as you are. Certainly, Maya replied. Several long moments passed while Ryan contacted dispatch for additional verification. Every record returned matched the information Maya had already provided. Her driver's license was valid. The registration belonged to her vehicle. There were no warrants, no alerts, and no indication of criminal activity. Even so, the original report remained incomplete enough that dispatch recommended waiting briefly while supervisors reviewed additional information connected to the earlier call. Maya quietly looked toward the digital clock glowing faintly on the dashboard. She calculated the passing minutes in silence, realizing the workshop participants would soon begin gathering inside the conference hall. She imagined volunteers checking their watches, organizers reviewing the schedule, and young officers taking seats expecting a presentation that had not yet begun. She felt disappointment, but not frustration. Emily noticed Maya glance toward the conference folder again and gently asked, "Is today's meeting important?" Maya smiled softly. Every conversation about trust is important. Those words lingered in the warm afternoon air longer than anyone expected. The elderly veteran lowered his grocery bags to the sidewalk and watched Maya's posture with growing curiosity. There was something unmistakably familiar about the quiet confidence she carried. Ryan heard another message arrive through his radio. Dispatch informed him that a supervising officer was reviewing new information and requested that everyone remain on scene just a little longer. Ryan thanked dispatch and looked once more toward Maya. Neither of them realized that the next update would transform an ordinary traffic stop into a lesson that everyone present would remember long after the flashing lights disappeared from the roadside. The afternoon seemed to slow with every passing minute as warm sunlight settled across the quiet roadside. Cars continued moving through the intersection only a few yards away, their drivers glancing briefly toward the patrol vehicles before continuing on. What had begun as a simple traffic stop now carried the uncomfortable weight of uncertainty. Maya Jefferson remained exactly where she had been asked to stand, her hands relaxed and clearly visible, her attention focused on Officer Ryan Carter without the slightest trace of resentment. Years of teaching communication under pressure had convinced her that calm was often contagious, even when fear threatened to interrupt reason. She reminded herself of the same lesson she had shared with countless audiences. People rarely made their best decisions when they believed they had only seconds to think. Officer Emily Brooks quietly stepped closer to Ryan, careful to keep her voice low enough that nearby bystanders could not hear. "Everything dispatch has verified matches what she told us," she said gently. Ryan nodded, but he continued reviewing the limited information displayed on the patrol computer. The original report that had prompted the stop remained frustratingly incomplete. It contained enough uncertainty to justify asking questions, but not enough evidence to explain why those questions still remained unanswered. Ryan looked back toward Maya, searching for anything that might resolve the contradiction growing inside his own thoughts. The woman standing before him had followed every instruction with remarkable precision. She had never interrupted, never argued, and never attempted to rush the process despite repeatedly glancing toward the dashboard clock inside her sedan. Emily noticed the same detail. "You have checked the time several times," she said kindly. "Are you expected somewhere?" Maya smiled with quiet regret. "There are people waiting for a conversation I promised to have with them today. I only hope they know I have not forgotten them." Emily found herself unexpectedly moved by the answer. There was no complaint hidden inside those words, only disappointment that others might be inconvenienced. Nearby, the elderly veteran who had been observing from beneath the maple tree slowly approached the edge of the sidewalk while still respecting the officer's space. He watched Maya's posture once again before quietly speaking to no one in particular. Some people spend a lifetime learning how to stay calm, so everyone else can think clearly. Ryan heard the comment, but remained focused on procedure. Even so, the words lingered in his thoughts longer than he expected. A young mother standing outside a nearby pharmacy gently guided her daughter away from the growing crowd. Before leaving, the little girl looked back toward Maya and offered a small wave. Maya returned the gesture with a warm smile that instantly softened the child's worried expression. Emily noticed the exchange and quietly wondered how someone under such scrutiny still found room to reassure another person. Just then, Ryan's radio crackled to life. Dispatch informed him that Captain Laura Bennett had personally joined the review after recognizing a detail connected to the government seal described on the leather presentation folder. She requested that no further assumptions be made until additional records were confirmed through official channels. Ryan acknowledged the instruction immediately. For the first time since the stop had begun, he lowered the handheld radio slowly instead of responding right away. The certainty that had guided him only minutes earlier was beginning to give way to careful reflection. Maya remained patient, saying nothing, allowing the process to unfold at its own pace. The breeze carried the faint scent of blooming flowers from a nearby landscape bed as the afternoon light grew softer across the roadside. Somewhere across town, the conference hall remained filled with empty expectation while volunteers quietly delayed the opening session, believing their keynote speaker would arrive at any moment. None of the people waiting there knew that the lesson they had gathered to hear was already unfolding in real time beside a quiet suburban road. And none of the people standing at that roadside yet realized that Captain Bennett was about to receive a piece of information capable of changing the entire meaning of the afternoon. The roadside grew unexpectedly quiet after Captain Laura Bennett joined the review from headquarters. No one hurried. No one interrupted the silence that had slowly settled over the intersection. Officer Ryan Carter stood beside his patrol vehicle listening carefully as dispatch relayed a new series of questions, each one more specific than the last. They were no longer asking whether Maya Jefferson's identification was valid because that had already been confirmed. Instead, they wanted to verify the purpose of the leather presentation folder resting on the passenger seat and the conference listed on the printed schedule found inside her vehicle records. Ryan answered each question carefully before glancing once more toward Maya. She remained exactly where she had been throughout the encounter, her posture relaxed, her attention steady, and her expression remarkably patient despite the growing delay. Officer Emily Brooks quietly stepped closer and lowered her voice. "She has done everything we asked. She announced every movement before making it. Every record has matched. Maybe the missing piece is not about her." Ryan looked toward the patrol computer without answering immediately. For the first time that afternoon, he replayed the entire encounter in his mind from the beginning rather than focusing only on the unanswered report that had prompted the stop. He remembered Maya greeting him politely before he spoke, explaining where every document was located before reaching for anything, and waiting for permission at every step. None of those details fit the picture he had unconsciously formed during the first few moments of the stop. A soft breeze carried the scent of flowering shrubs across the roadside, while sunlight reflected gently from the windshield of Maya's sedan. The elderly veteran still stood quietly beneath the maple tree, watching with thoughtful eyes. He noticed Ryan's posture change ever so slightly. The tension that had been visible in his shoulders since the beginning had begun to ease, replaced by careful reflection. A few bystanders who had remained nearby lowered their phones completely, sensing that the story unfolding before them was becoming less about suspicion and more about understanding. Then Ryan's radio sounded once again. Dispatch spoke with unusual precision. "Captain Bennett has confirmed the conference registration. Please stand by while she joins this channel." A brief pause followed before the captain's calm voice came across the speaker. "Officer Carter, I have personally contacted the conference organizers. They are currently delaying today's workshop because their keynote speaker has not arrived." Ryan listened without speaking. The captain continued. "The keynote speaker is Maya Jefferson. She was invited by our department and several community organizations to lead today's training on communication during high-pressure encounters between officers and civilians." The words seemed to settle across the roadside with unexpected weight. Emily slowly turned toward Maya, her expression filled not with surprise alone, but with growing understanding. Ryan looked toward the leather folder on the passenger seat, then back at Maya. Suddenly, every small detail that had seemed disconnected now fit together with complete clarity. The handwritten notes, the government seal, the repeated glances toward the dashboard clock, the quiet concern about people waiting across town. Maya had never once mentioned her role to gain an advantage or shorten the encounter. She had simply trusted that the truth would eventually speak for itself. Captain Bennett spoke once more before ending the transmission. "Officer Carter, complete the encounter according to procedure." Then please ensure Ms. Jefferson is able to continue to the conference. I believe everyone involved today, including our own department, has something valuable to learn from what has happened here. Ryan slowly lowered the radio. The afternoon looked exactly the same as it had only minutes earlier, yet the entire meaning of the moment had changed. Standing only a few feet away, Maya offered the same calm expression she had carried from the beginning, waiting not for recognition, but for understanding to arrive before judgment. Officer Ryan Carter remained silent for several long seconds after lowering the radio. The steady confidence that had guided him through the encounter had quietly given way to something far more difficult to confront. He looked toward Maya Jefferson with fresh eyes, no longer seeing only the unanswered report that had prompted the stop, but the complete picture that had been forming in front of him from the very beginning. Every careful explanation, every patient pause, every respectful response suddenly carried a meaning he had overlooked. Officer Emily Brooks gently stepped beside him without speaking. She did not need to. The realization was visible across Ryan's face. Maya stood exactly where she had been throughout the encounter, showing no trace of triumph or resentment. She simply waited, allowing the silence to do what hurried words never could. The elderly veteran beneath the maple tree quietly smiled to himself. He had recognized the quiet discipline long before anyone knew Maya's name. Nearby, several bystanders who had remained out of curiosity slowly placed their phones into their pockets. The atmosphere no longer felt like the beginning of a dramatic incident. Instead, it felt like the closing moments of an important lesson that no one had expected to receive. Ryan took one slow breath before walking toward Maya. His voice remained steady, but the certainty within it had changed completely. Ms. Jefferson, I owe you an apology. Maya met his eyes with the same calm expression she had carried all afternoon. Ryan continued carefully. You cooperated fully from the first moment. You explained every movement before making it. You treated us with respect, even while waiting far longer than anyone should have. I allowed uncertainty to become assumption before all the facts were available. I am sincerely sorry for the delay and for the misunderstanding. Maya listened without interrupting. After a brief pause, she offered a gentle smile that reflected neither victory nor judgment. Officer Carter, difficult moments reveal character more clearly than easy ones, she answered softly. Every profession asks people to make decisions with incomplete information. What matters most is whether we remain willing to recognize new information when it arrives. Ryan lowered his eyes for a moment before nodding. I understand that now. Emily quietly retrieved Maya's driver's license and registration after the final verification had been completed, handing them back with both hands. Thank you for your patience, she said sincerely. Maya accepted the documents with quiet gratitude. Thank you for treating the process professionally. Ryan glanced toward the leather presentation folder resting on the passenger seat. The captain informed us about today's workshop, he said. I suppose everyone has been waiting for you. Maya smiled with gentle disappointment. They have probably been using the extra time to meet one another. Sometimes conversations begin before the speaker arrives. The answer caught Emily completely off guard. Even after everything that had happened, Maya's first thought remained focused on encouraging the people waiting across town. Dispatch transmitted one final message informing Ryan that the encounter had officially concluded and that Captain Laura Bennett requested both officers attend the workshop once their shift responsibilities allowed. Ryan acknowledged the instruction before carefully stepping away from Maya's vehicle. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee from a nearby cafe as sunlight reflected warmly across the windshield of the sedan. The elderly veteran quietly tipped his cap toward Maya before continuing toward his truck. She returned the gesture with genuine respect. Around them, ordinary life slowly resumed. Cars moved through the intersection once again. Shoppers continued carrying grocery bags toward their vehicles, and the roadside gradually returned to the peaceful rhythm it had known before the misunderstanding began. Yet for everyone who had witnessed the encounter, the ordinary afternoon no longer felt quite the same. They had watched assumptions slowly surrender to truth, and they understood that the most powerful authority displayed that day had not come from a uniform, a title, or a badge. It had come from the quiet strength of a person who never allowed dignity to disappear, even while waiting for others to see what had been true all along. The drive to the community conference center took less than 15 minutes. Yet for Officer Ryan Carter it felt much longer. Every traffic light seemed to offer another opportunity to replay the afternoon in his mind. He remembered Captain Laura Bennett's words during the morning briefing. Observe first. Verify second. Decide last. Somewhere between those 3 steps, he realized he had allowed uncertainty to move faster than understanding. Officer Emily Brooks quietly noticed that Ryan had barely spoken since leaving the roadside. She did not interrupt his thoughts. Some lessons required silence before they became permanent. At the conference center, volunteers waiting near the entrance immediately recognized Maya Jefferson's sedan as it turned into the parking lot. Relief spread across their faces before anyone said a word. One organizer hurried toward the driver's side with a warm smile. "We were beginning to worry," he admitted gently. Maya stepped out carrying the leather presentation folder as though the unexpected delay had never happened. "Thank you for waiting," she replied. "Good conversations are worth waiting for." The organizer laughed softly and welcomed her inside without asking another question. Ryan and Emily remained near their patrol vehicle for a moment, uncertain whether they should enter. Before either officer made a decision, Captain Laura Bennett arrived from another entrance and greeted them with a calm expression. She looked first at Ryan before speaking. Every officer will eventually experience a day that reshapes the way they see this profession. The important question is whether that day changes only your memory or also your judgment. Ryan nodded quietly. "I would like it to change both." Bennett smiled faintly before motioning toward the conference hall. "Then come inside. Listen before you speak." Hundreds of chairs filled the auditorium, occupied by neighborhood leaders, academy instructors, clergy members, business owners, veterans, students, and patrol officers from neighboring communities. The atmosphere was warm rather than formal. Instead of walking directly to the podium, Maya moved through the audience greeting people individually, thanking volunteers for their patience and shaking hands with attendees who had traveled from different counties to participate. She finally stepped onto the stage carrying only her handwritten notes. Looking across the audience, she paused for a brief moment before beginning. "Today did not unfold according to anyone's schedule," she said with a gentle smile. Quiet laughter spread across the room. Sometimes the lesson arrives before the presentation does. The audience settled into complete silence. Maya continued speaking about trust, responsibility, and the importance of slowing down long enough to recognize another person's humanity before allowing assumptions to shape decisions. She never mentioned the roadside encounter directly. She never described the delay or identified anyone involved. Instead, she spoke about ordinary moments that quietly become defining moments when people choose patience instead of certainty. Ryan listened from the back row beside Emily and Captain Bennett. Every sentence felt unexpectedly personal, not because Maya criticized anyone, but because she refused to. Her words carried neither accusation nor bitterness. They carried invitation. Invitation to become better tomorrow than yesterday. Near the end of the workshop, Maya looked across the audience once more. "Respect should never be reserved for people after we discover their accomplishments," she said softly. "Respect is where understanding begins, not where it ends." No one applauded immediately. The room remained still for several thoughtful seconds before gentle applause slowly filled the auditorium. Ryan remained seated even after others stood. He realized that the most important training session of his career had not begun inside that conference hall. It had begun hours earlier on a quiet roadside where one person's patience had accomplished what no lecture alone ever could. At that moment, he silently promised himself that every encounter from that day forward would begin with observation, continue with verification, and end only after understanding had finally caught up with first impressions. Several weeks passed, yet the afternoon beside the quiet suburban road continued, shaping conversations in ways no one could have predicted. The community workshop had become the beginning of something much larger than a single event. Local civic organizations, neighborhood leaders, police instructors, and residents began meeting regularly to discuss practical ways to strengthen trust before misunderstandings had the chance to grow. Maya Jefferson accepted every invitation with the same quiet humility she had shown from the beginning. She never described herself as the center of the story. Whenever someone asked about the roadside encounter, she gently redirected the conversation toward the future rather than the past. The goal is not to remember one difficult day, she would say with a warm smile. The goal is to create many better ones. Officer Ryan Carter carried that lesson into every shift that followed. He slowed down when situations felt uncertain. He listened longer before reaching conclusions. He found himself asking one additional question before making decisions that once would have seemed obvious. His fellow officers noticed the change almost immediately. Officer Emily Brooks quietly observed that people appeared more willing to speak openly during routine encounters because Ryan now focused first on understanding rather than assuming. Captain Laura Bennett recognized the transformation as well. During a department training session, she asked Ryan to describe the most valuable lesson he had learned that year. He paused thoughtfully before answering. Professionalism is not only about following procedure. It is about remembering that every person has a story you cannot see from the first few seconds. The room remained silent as dozens of officers reflected on the simple truth. Several months later, Maya returned to the same conference center to lead another workshop. This time, every seat in the auditorium was filled long before the program began. Among the attendees sat Ryan, Emily, Captain Bennett, community volunteers, veterans, teachers, business owners, and several young academy recruits preparing for careers in public service. Maya stepped onto the stage carrying the same leather presentation folder and the same handwritten notes she had carried on the afternoon when everything unexpectedly changed. Looking across the audience, she smiled with genuine gratitude. Trust grows slowly, she began. It grows one respectful conversation at a time, one careful decision at a time, and one willingness to learn at a time. No dramatic stories followed. No one was singled out. Instead, the workshop focused on practical listening, thoughtful communication, and the quiet responsibility shared by every person in the room. After the session ended, attendees gathered in small circles continuing conversations that stretched well into the evening. Ryan waited patiently until the crowd had begun to thin before approaching Maya. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not only for today, but for choosing understanding when you had every reason to choose frustration." Maya smiled gently before extending her hand. Growth is always a better ending than resentment. Ryan shook her hand with quiet respect, knowing those words would remain with him for the rest of his career. Outside, the setting sun covered the parking lot in soft shades of gold and amber. Families walked toward their cars, volunteers folded tables, and the last conversations faded into the gentle evening breeze. Maya placed the leather folder inside her sedan exactly as she had done countless times before, then looked across the nearly empty lot one final time. Nothing about the place seemed extraordinary. It was simply another ordinary evening in another ordinary American town. Yet sometimes the most meaningful changes begin in places that never appear remarkable at all. As Maya drove away beneath the warm glow of the fading sky, Ryan remained standing quietly beside the entrance, watching until the sedan disappeared beyond the trees. He realized that true authority is never measured by how quickly someone speaks or how confidently someone assumes. It is measured by the patience to seek the truth, the humility to admit when understanding arrives late, and the courage to treat every person with dignity before knowing anything else about them.